You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello, welcome back to the podcast. This is Alex. I am cruising along on my 4-part series about how my relationship with supplements changed over the years. So this is part 3. Welcome, welcome. I hope you've listened to parts 1 and 2 because this is one long trajectory story. So even if you listen now, make sure to go back and listen to the first couple because it'll give you a lot of context of how I ended up here, and especially today, which is mostly about how I took the least amount of supplements ever for a portion of my life. So we'll dig into all that. This is also in celebration of the Cyber Monday full script deal that they have for an extra 20% off. And this is part of our full script formulary, which has all our favorite stuff, the stuff that we use inside our group programs, all our favorite things that we've used over the years, our favorite companies, all of that is in there. And then even after the Cyber Monday deal is done, our shop has a standing 15% off, and we just do that literally because we've been in the shoes of buying supplements for so long that we're like, it's expensive and it adds up, and it's not a small investment, which is why today's podcast is such an important topic. So I'm so jazzed up about this because literally this is like the thing that people don't want to talk about, and yet it's a really important key. So hang with me. Even if you're excited about supplements, there's going to be a lot to gather from this. Okay. But essentially, the full script deal is going on from Monday to Thursday for their Cyber Monday. The link for that is zestyginger.com/zestyfullscript, all one word. But the link is also in the show notes. Don't worry about it if you didn't catch that. All right, so part 3, I called it Releasing into More, because as you probably heard in the first 2, right, part 1 of this was just finding that options existed, and I was just so grateful and excited and wanted to learn. And my brain, I'm geared for this kind of stuff. I love learning. This is what I'm built for, and I just ran with it. And you'll hear how some of the stuff that it was even from back there almost 2 decades ago is still in our full script, like the things that lasted, the things that stuck around for that long. Then part 2 was all about getting a lot more intentional, getting a lot more strategic, how to utilize testing, how to think of the body in its entirety and say, how do we live in this modern world and address what we have going on and not, and still be participating, not right? Because a lot of times people are like, well, eat this really limited diet and don't have anything that's in your house that has chemicals in it and blah blah blah, and you're kind of like, well, yeah, but I'm not gonna sit in my house the whole time, right? And so it became a lot more how do you interact with all of this stuff? And I learned so much from that, and it was so helpful, and that stuff is still playing out in my life, and a ton of that stuff is in the full script formula. For that reason, I really don't plan to deviate from that kind of stuff. However, when I ended part 2, I alluded to this, is that once I got to a certain point with it, the focus on being really strategic and tracking things and always having the right stuff became a problem for me. And that we see this all the time in different, whether it's supplements or with food or with even parasympathetic tools. You can overdo and go down a rabbit hole where it's like, oh no, I haven't meditated today and now I'm beating myself up and I feel really guilty and oh no, why am I like this? It's just like, hold your horses. You're trying to do something good for yourself. And that's essentially what happened, where I was like, I remember, and this wasn't like the moment that was the big one, but it was a moment where I went on vacation. I was really excited about it, but it turned out I'd forgotten some of the supplements that I like to travel with, and I just had a full-blown meltdown about it. And I really, to a certain extent, I felt like I was powerless in the vacation, because I had all these things that, I'm like, oh, I have this for if I get some cross-contamination with gluten. I have this for if I don't sleep well. I have this for if, I get skin irritation or a headache or whatever, right? I had this whole little toolkit, and I was proud of it and liked it. And there's honestly nothing wrong with it. I like having that stuff. But then what happened was, when I didn't have it, it wasn't that, I'm powerful, I know how to navigate my body, I have all the resources and tools and the knowledge to do this, and if I don't have those, I'll get to it a different way. That wasn't my reaction. My reaction was, oh my gosh, I'm now at the mercy of this. I don't have my stuff. I'm completely powerless. If anything happens, I'm just screwed. Right? And you can hear the difference between those two responses. And it was after a couple, honestly, Meg and I always joke around, like, we don't catch on quick, which is how it's taken us like 2 decades, right? But ultimately we do. It gets loud enough. And with that, I began to see I was setting up some problems there. I was really putting all my eggs in this basket, and it was a very powerful basket, but I left out a lot of the stuff. So phase 3 and part 3 of my supplement relationship was when I began to take more supplements out of my life, now they didn't leave my toolkit. If something happens, I absolutely just go to my supplement cupboard, I get it out and I take it. That's not what I mean. However, that was when I began to really challenge myself and say, the whole point of a lot of this stuff is to go live your life at some point. And what I was starting to do was, I would resolve one problem, right? Like, I increased my ovarian reserve enough. My doctor looked at me like I was growing a third head, so that's not possible. And I was like, well, that's what's happening, so that's cool. It was feeling better from a chronic pain perspective. A lot of good stuff was happening. I became a lot less sensitive to foods, to heal my SIBO, all of that. And then I would just keep learning about other things, and those things had supplements, and I would just kind of go on to the next thing. I wouldn't change that, because it gave me so much firsthand experience with stuff, and because I dealt with it personally and experienced it. When someone comes like, oh, that one supplement, I had this weird reaction, a lot of times I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, I know exactly what, like, I had that happen, this is, what I did, blah, 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 right? And so I wouldn't change it by any means, but there is a point where you can go down the rabbit hole so much, it's like you keep sort of creating issues to work on and learn about, and that's what I was doing. And because of that, then I began to say, well, what's actually not helpful about that is not that there's something wrong with the supplements. There isn't. What's wrong with that is that I am willing to sacrifice other aspects of who I am as like a overall being, right? All of me, all parts of me, nothing left out, absolutely everything. I'm sacrificing some of that to deal with these other things and get all spun up about, having my supplements or not, when really I started to realize, this is when Megan and I went down this rabbit hole internally before we even started talking about it, right? Nothing on the podcast, nothing on social media. Like, we were just living our life, uncovering the next layer. And we began to realize how much the thoughts we held and the beliefs that we held around our bodies, what our potential was, what we thought about healing, there was a lot to uncover there. And we're like, well, honestly, if we're going to focus on stuff, like, you can't do it all for unless you are very well balanced in it. But usually as you're learning, you're not well balanced, because that's the point. You are still learning, right? And so with that, we began to shift our focus a little bit, and that meant there was less time devoted to that. And so it actually happened quite gradually. I did have some aha moments where I was like, oh yeah, this needs to change. But gradually, as we shifted our focus towards like, what am I actually believing, right? I had to sit with, do I think that if I don't have my supplements on vacation that I am really screwed? Or is this just a way that I've taught myself to expect it to be? And do I have other things in the toolkit that help with that, right? And the answer was yes. And over time, I began to see that I had a lot of thoughts of things that people told me, oh, you can get better in this regard, but you can't ever heal this. Or you can expect some improvement here, or you can expect that you have the potential, but with your genetics and with the things that have happened, probably not, right? And we began to ask ourselves, do we agree? There's lots of things that you hear. For example, I was told you're going into menopause in another 6 months. Let's do surgery, let's do IVF, let's try it, but you're going to go into menopause. And I cried about that for a while. And then that was a moment where I stopped and said, I'm not willing to buy that as a story, right? And then you already heard I didn't, and I got better. And in this part of life is when I actually saw, in retrospect, the power of that decision. I said, how can I do that intentionally instead of waiting for it to just sort of pop up years later when I could recap and recount what had happened. And so as the focus moved towards bringing more awareness to our emotional space, what were our emotions saying? What filters were we using to make decisions, right? That was what happened with supplements, is that you make certain interpretations of what's going to happen and what you're going to do because you're looking through a certain filter at it. It's like having beliefs are like filters on Instagram or TikTok or anywhere else. It changes the look of it, right? And that's where our brain has that handy function built in so that we can generalize things and we can make sense of the world and all of that. But essentially, for example, I originally had the filter of nothing ever works for me, right? So I could take all the supplements. My brain would be like, hey, we have to make sure this is not right, right? Or if we learned, oh, this supplement is harmful, anything we hear about that supplement is going to go through the filter of it's harmful. So whether it's like, oh, they're lying or they're wrong or that's just misrepresented data, all of that becomes the interpretation. So the filter then, we started saying we have filters for everything in our life, including what our potential is, our healing potential, what impact we can make on the world, how supplements work inside our bodies or not, what meditation means, what is the concept of personal power, and how much decision making do you have in your life? Are you the authority, or is everyone else the authority and you feel like you are at the mercy of everybody else? These are big questions. But once we got there, I really began to see there's a lot more to me. There's a whole lot more to me when it comes to who I am in my experience of life that has nothing to do with supplements or, quite frankly, lab work. And that's where when you hear us talking about the concept where we're like, it's so easy to pee on the strips, right? Like the neurotransmitter test and the hormone test. You pee on some strips at home. You don't even have a needle stick. You pee on some stuff, you send it in, you get customized supplements, you buy them and you put them down the hatch. Like there is actually, all the second guessing and wondering if it's going to work and worrying about it and thinking like, oh, is that a side effect or why is that happening? All that is, yeah, that's all the mindset stuff. But the actual doing of the testing and the supplements is like the easiest thing that you do, right? Like that is an easy part of life. You can definitely swallow, like if you can swallow things, yeah, and then even then there's liquid. So all of these things, we began to see them for what they truly were, and me continuing to beat down that path was not supportive. And so it wasn't that I completely went off myself and was like, this is nonsense. It wasn't. I was a lot more minimal, but I was still strategic, right? So things like that I knew were generally supportive of me. I knew that I was in a fight or flight space. I knew that most of the time my body felt more, or rather my brain, and therefore told my body that I felt more unsafe most of the time. And I was sitting on some trauma that I still needed to unpack even more. I had done a lot, but there's still a lot more to unpack, right? And the things that had happened to me, I began to acknowledge that those things needed support in a bunch of different ways. And yet some things stuck around. So things like magnesium, right, for general calming, for building blocks. Magnesium is a really important cofactor for a lot of biochemical reactions inside cells. That kind of stuff stayed around. Things like chamomile and lavender, tinctures that I love getting off Fullscript, those all stuck around because it wasn't that I was throwing that out. I was just saying, out of all the things that I have here, what are the ones that I can interact with in a way that make me feel happy and joyful? And that was a question I had never really asked, because I was willing to eat anything, take anything, do any test if it would make me feel better. And at some point I was like, honestly, if that all makes me miserable, then like what's the point of having good health if I can't even be happy and enjoy my life doing those things? So they became, the chamomile lavender, like I did the teas, I did the tinctures inside, like I would make these little mocktails for myself, right? The magnesium, I was like, I have magnesium, but I can also do Epsom salt baths and do it topically that way. Which one of these feels the best to me? Which one is supportive? And that was one of the questions that I really like with the coach that I worked with, Lisa Carpenter. She had me ask, what is it that I can do right now to support myself feeling better? And that wasn't just physically feeling better, but it had to, not had to, but in order to really work with all of me, it was like it had to feel good emotionally, it had to feel good physically in my body, it had to not be an extra stressor. And I began to really look at all of this at a microscope the same way that I looked at labs. I took it just as seriously to say, what is my response to this? Because we see this happening all the time. People are like, I made myself do XYZ, but it's not working and I'm unhappy, but there's something wrong with me that it's not working and I'm unhappy. So they double down on the guilt and shame. And that's exactly what I was doing too, which is why we can see it so easily in other people. Rather than saying, there's so many options, there's so many ways to get at this, there's so many aspects of you that are available for healing, and really, every single percentage point you get up in any category contributes to the overall 100% of feeling good, right? And so as I began to do things like when I walked past a mirror, I would think, God, I hate you. Like, this is straight up. Or, God, you're so ugly. Or, you suck. Like, I was so mean to myself. Because I've spent so much time on it, like, it kind of hurts me to even say that right now, because, like, I don't think that way anymore. However, that is what I had. And so I was like, wow, that is fascinating that I see mirrors and, walk past windows all the time. So that is constantly going on. And like, there's no supplement for that guy, right? There's nothing to do but actually work on that and get to the point where I can say, I even understand what self-love is. Like, I didn't even have a concept for it. I was like, well, I can love other people because I can do nice things for them. But like, you kind of get tired of doing the bubble baths. Like, what does that even look like? And to realize that talking to yourself nicely, the beliefs that, I'm ugly, my thighs are too fat, the cellulite's gross, my hair's too thin, it looks scraggly on the ends. All of those things were also just as important. And my brain, my central nervous system, was hearing it just as much. So, in part 2, I had spent all this time on hypothalamus supplementation and protection for the brain and inflammation and all that. And yet I was actively doing the stuff that actually made that worse. And so it's actually a real testament to supplements that I was really improving along this whole path. but the rate at which I started to improve with minimal support in terms of like experience of like I had said, I had resolved a lot of the health issues that started me down this path. But if you keep sort of being like, oh, that's an issue I can address, you just keep creating issues rather than just enjoying the health that you have and being like, I'm gonna, just pick the minimal supplements at this part of my life. We're good. I don't need the other ones. And of course, that's where having the toolkit is really important, because sometimes you do bring out the supplements again, which is really back to part 4, which is where we're going to go next. But in this part, I didn't do a whole lot of them. I listed some of it. You'll see all that in full script too. There's lots of ways to get at this. And yet, this part can, even if it was no supplements at all, this part has a lot of validity to it, because I was really digging into so many aspects of how I responded to myself and the things around me, that then with that getting worked on, it allowed everything else to work so much better. I mean, now when I take supplements, and I'll get into this in part 4, now when I take supplements, it's the response is huge. And I can't remember the last time I've had like a side effect that I've had to deal with. I'm not saying that that's going to be forever and that'll never happen to me. I'm just saying the rate at which my brain responds to everything as a threat is very different now. And that's not magic. That's the central nervous system making decisions. That's exactly what was keeping my hormones really low, right? And therefore, now with the capacity to respond, now my brain reacts to everything differently. And ironically, even though now my supplement, I don't have as many, I probably could handle way more. And honestly, in life, I handle way more. There's things that I do that I wouldn't even be able to handle, and ways that I've overcome things because of that. But it plays out for supplements just the same. It's all just, what is your brain perceiving and what filters does it have on? And I just even really recently did a podcast episode on, does what you think about your supplements impact how they act in your body? And so if you're curious about that whole subject, there's a whole podcast episode about that. But this part 3, even though it sounds the least eventful for supplements, and it really was, I will say was the glue that I think brought everything together and brought me really what I needed. And then part 4, we're going to talk about how the supplements came back in a vastly different way over the time, and then how the toolkit actually got blown way open. So instead of toolkits for supplements, now the toolkit had lots and lots of other aspects of me covered, so that whether it was a physical thing that needed a way of interacting with my central nervous system, like one of the parasympathetic tools, or a supplement, or an emotional thing that I could do process around, journaling, probably, like we do this a lot in our Health Transformation Accelerator program. How do you interact with your emotions? How do you give them a voice? How do you get them out? And even energy in the body, like energetic imprints that we have been holding on to from things that have happened to us. All of that became much more of a toolkit, and supplements are just simply one important, and yet still just one portion of that toolkit. So now then it gave me that much bigger perspective of, yeah, I got these and they're great. And I do, like I have restarted a protocol recently. I'll talk about that in part 4. But my relationship, it never causes me stress. It's not a stressor. It is simply a way I use to support myself and show myself love, and that is it. That's what the supplements do, right? Because I understand how they're working, but more importantly, I understand my relationship with how they fit into the overall experience of life that I have, that I'm now actively standing at the helm of and making decisions, rather than letting other people run the show and tell me what to do, right, so that will be part 4. Circle back around to that. And don't forget, so through Thursday, the full script has that additional 20% off. So, whatever you've been planning on trying or things that you're hoping to re-up, the 20% off makes a pretty significant dent in a lot of this stuff. So take advantage, enjoy, and can't wait to see you on part 4. All right, toodaloo.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.